All right. So, Andy and Darcy, welcome to the show. How are you both?
Doing good. Thank you for having me.
Great. Yeah. Loving life.
Good stuff, man. Well, we're here to talk about your new documentary, Transmedium, Puerto Rico's UFOs, which comes on the tail of your previous one, Darcy, Transmedium, which, again, great movie. Really love the fact that you're touching upon that area. You know, I think it's been talked about now for a few years, but no one's really made anything of it. So really good to see you come out with not one, but two documentaries covering it. And especially this new one, I really enjoy anything where people are boots on the ground. I just think it really speaks volumes about people actually getting out there on location. So tell me first of all about Puerto Rico, either of you. Like, what's the history like when it comes to the UFO phenomena?
It's basically a part of everyday life out there, honestly. It's something that happens so often that it's I don't know, it's like commonplace, I guess you could say. And almost everybody has some kind of a story or some kind of a sighting. That's how active this island is, or at least the waters around the island are that active. And it's where I had my first experience as a child, as you already know.
What about you, Darcy? Did you look into this before? Is it something that you were already aware of?
Well, yeah, I mean, you saw the last documentary, and kudos to you too for being a boots on the ground investigator. I saw the stuff you did in Colombia, and I'd love to see that get a proper, treatment eventually. If you ever need help, let me know.
Thank you.
The last documentary where I got to sit down with Mark D'Antonio, Tim Gallaudet, Jim Goodall, Richard Dolan, Chris Stiles, Louis Borges, and a bunch of other interesting people that we just kind of profiled in that have been covering the ocean-based phenomenon. Puerto Rico came up a lot. And, Mark D'Antonio mentions a Japanese freighter that was experiencing USO activity off the coast of Puerto Rico in the 50s. My doc came out. Bob McGuire, otherwise known as Science Bob, he reached out to me, told me about his experience out at the, in the waters on a submarine with USO activity. And Puerto Rico's just been fabled to always have strange and anomalous activity around the island. I was working on a completely different documentary. I was visiting a friend in Tucson. Actually, I was crashing at Jim Goodall's and went and met with this lady and was talking with her about something completely different. And she has like this whole collection of Jim Nichols art. I don't know if do you know who Jim Nichols is?
It doesn't ring any bells. I might be familiar with it if I saw it, though.
This guy does, first of all, he was a UFO researcher for decades, and he did stuff for like History Channel and, helped write books and all kinds of stuff. He is like an OG researcher, and he also hand painted some amazing UFO art in his time. And one of the pieces that she showed me, she said, he told me before he passed away, this is a very important incident in the history of ufology. And it was a little like 4x6 painting that displayed this kind of large, somewhat triangular craft hovering over Puerto Rico and two jets pacing it. And that was from December of 1988. That incident. And there's two incidents where that occurred over Puerto Rico, actually, 2 times in their history where fighter jets were scrambled to intercept a massive UFO hovering over the island. And in both events, they were mass witness daylight sightings. And, So I kept that in my mind. And then Andy and I, he's one of my homies, and he was featured in the original Transmedium documentary at the end, just an expose on how he brought that original UAP footage that was from Bob that worked for Department of Homeland Security, and leaked that footage to him. And then he vetted it, took it to SCU, put it through the proper scrutiny paces, and that eventually ended up in the public. And Andy and I stayed in touch. And the moment we met in New York, when I filmed his interview, he was like, "Man, have you ever looked into Puerto Rico?" And I'm like, "Puerto Rico just keeps coming up on my radar, man. Like, it is a hotspot apparently, and I've never been. I heard it's beautiful." And he's like, "Yeah, we should go there sometime." So we stayed in touch, and we slowly but surely planned to fly out there. And the planning was really over like 6 months. And we finally secured somewhat of an itinerary. So when we landed, we could go and meet with people. That's why it took so long. And, it was expensive. And I got COVID for sure on that trip. So did he. And so, it was a wild, fast and furious trip with my man Vin Diesel here. But it was well worth it, and we got a lot of really good testimony and information out of that. And that's kind of what the inception of it was.
Amazing. You mentioned there about Andy releasing the DHS videos, and it was somewhat surprising to see them actually pop up on the DHS website, I think last year, along with the 2013 Aguadilla video, which kind of forms the first kind of half, let's say maybe, of the new documentary. And I know, Andy, from conversations we've had in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've said in the past that Aguadilla is probably one of your all-time favorite UFO videos for what it shows. Am I right?
It's the one I've always talked about whenever I brought up the subject. That's the very first video I would mention because, honestly, when you think about it, still to this day, 2024, it's the most incredible footage to come out from a legitimate, source like that, captured on that kind of camera and seen by the people that was seen, and also corroborating evidence, information from the tower that had seen something out in the on radar. So it's also the only video that shows something traveling through the air and then entering into another medium and then splitting into two different parts. Like, there's nothing that I've ever seen besides that footage that shows anything remotely close to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that probably not a lot of people know beyond that, and I'd forgotten about it until I watched the new movie, is that there were people on the ground at the airport. They didn't see anything. The other people on board the airplane didn't see anything, yet the guy with the FLIR camera could see it. So it wasn't necessarily just naked to the visible eye, which makes it even more curious and spectacular. And, there have been people, no name's going to be mentioned here on this show, who are adamant that it shows something like a Chinese lantern or a balloon. And I really struggle with that, I think, as you guys do, and a lot of people do, right?
Yeah, if it was a balloon, why did it go against the wind towards the beach? So it came actually originally from the ocean in that direction, did a scan over the Rafael Hernandez International Airport in the Aguadilla area, the west of the island, and then proceeded against the wind, which a Mylar balloon or just like a party balloon, standard basic B, would not be able to exhibit those flight characteristics. I've actually debated with Mark D'Antonio about this because he says he disagreed with the SCU's summation of their scientific analysis of that footage. And he said, oh, well, it probably just got swept up in an upper air current channel and then was able to fly against the wind, so to speak. But then it goes into the ocean. And I mean, that's why it was important to feature this at the start of the documentary in this sort of like ongoing theme of UFOs having the capability. They exhibit transmedium capabilities where they're able to fly around. They've got mastery of our skies, which is a gaseous liquid, and then they fly into lakes, oceans, rivers, unimpeded by the physics and frictions of what our typical, ocean or watery liquid environments would demonstrate, right? Like a boat, a skier, any kind of craft that is running at a speed against water. Water's uncompressible. So it will become a solid when you're going at a certain speed against it. And this thing didn't slow down. It ended up going into the ocean, splitting into two, which in my opinion is like a salute to the observer. F you, I'm leaving. Like you cannot track me, and this is how I'm going to elude you. And that shows intelligence, and that shows mastery again over our technology, because this was a CBP plane that was pacing the UFO, tracking it, that was probably equipped with a MX-15 system. Shout out to Dave Falch, who we brought in to do an analysis of the footage and compare it to the systems he repairs all the time through his 9-to-5 work. Basically, it's an incredible piece of footage. I encourage skeptics to try and scrutinize it even further. I'm not trying to be closed to other opinions, but I think it's a smoking gun for UFO footage.
Yeah, and you mentioned the SCU analysis. I took another look at that today as well. And, they had 5 or 6 scientists working on that specific analysis. And I'm just going to read a couple of lines here. It says the conclusion, the object witnessed site by CBP and tower personnel and recorded on the CBP DHC-8's aircraft thermal imaging system is of unknown origin. There is no explanation for an object capable of traveling underwater at over 90 miles an hour with minimal impact as it enters the water, through the air at 120 miles an hour at low altitude, through a residential area, and it goes on. But what I will do is, for anybody watching, please go and check out the SCU analysis. It's very thorough and long. I'm going to link it in the description below. It all adds to this picture of this anomalous object. So please check it out. But one thing, again, in the documentary is you actually, and I'd love to know how this came about, you actually speak, Andy, one-on-one with the guy that leaked that video back in 2013. How on earth did that come about?
I know, right? So trust me, I was freaking out before he showed up. I was like, yo, I can't believe I'm about to talk to the guy of the video that I've been talking about for years. I'm like about to meet this dude. And honestly, it came about because when I first met Darcy from the last documentary and we started speaking on Puerto Rico, I had brought up to him about who I consider the George Knapp of Puerto Rico, which is Jorge Martin. He's literally the George Knapp of Puerto Rico. Like, that guy is all about the paranormal and UFOs and chupacabras and the new gargoyles that they're seeing out there. And I had Los Gargoyles, yeah. So I had, in the past, I tried reaching out to him through the email that I was given by a friend, and he responded, but never responded back to the next email that I sent back out. So I gave it to Darcy. I said, here, reach out to this guy. Darcy reached out and was able to get in touch with him. And that's basically how we ended up finding out that, he knew the individual. And I was like, what? And that we ended up finding out we were going to meet the guy. And I was like, what? I was like, "Are you kidding me? That guy." So yeah, that's basically how it started off. So I was pretty much geeking out the whole time.
It was it was an amazing, partnership in this research and effort, right? Like, yo hablo español poquito, and this guy, he's like sealing the deal with all the conversations. I remember getting on the first call with Jorge Martin, and he was like, "So, we have the agent that leaked the footage to me from CBP." And I'm like, "What footage, Jorge?" And he's like, "Have you heard of the Aguadilla 2013 footage?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Would you like to speak with him?" And I'm like, "Yeah, see." And so I quickly hung up that call and was like, "Andy, we're going to Puerto Rico." And he's like, "What? When?" Like that quick? One call with Jorge, and I'm like, "We found the guy that leaked the Aguadilla footage." And he was like, "You're kidding me." And I'm like, "Nope, we're going." And so that was like the catalyst. But obviously, we got to meet a lot of other very cool people while we were there. And there's more to that. Like since going there, we learned about like a lot more stories that we weren't able to cover in this documentary. So we're going to go back and we're going to like work with more people that we've built a network with there and try and uncover stories at like Navy bases where apparently UFOs touched down and met with supposedly people coming out of craft and stuff like that, like really strange stuff around the island, spreading all the way out to Vieques, which is a naval ground test area of Puerto Rico. It's part of their greater area, but it's technically a separate island. And yeah, there's just so much to cover on that island. So Puerto Rico is awesome. It's beautiful. The people are really amazing. And the weather's just fantastic. AC had to be run the whole time, but I enjoyed it.
So apparently, there's a family in Puerto Rico that I'm not going to get too much into the story, but the gist of it is that they have a legitimate biological body in their possession.
Whoa.
Well, at the beginning, apparently it was shown, and then after the individual that had that, that the experience with this entity or entities um, passed away, the family got greedy, and basically since then, no one's really seen it because they're asking for a lot of money to view the body. But they have it apparently encased in some kind of a liquid or something like that, and it's a small body. It's not a large. It's a fairly small being apparently.
That's crazy. I mean, wow. Hopefully, somehow it comes out eventually.
Yeah, the amazing thing about this island is that it's steeped in UFO history, right? Like whether it's stuff that's been happening with the American Navy and other naval vessels off the coast in the ocean or actually on the island. Like there's a story about a downed UFO in the Ajunque National Rainforest, which is their major rainforest in the middle of the island. And the National like Forestry Service locked it down. Apparently, NASA flew to the island and were investigating this crash site. Like, it's incredible some of the stories that are coming from it. Like, out of all the things you could constantly hear about from a certain area, right? Like, it's like the Skinwalker Ranch of islands in terms of strange phenomenon constantly being reported. And we touched on gargoyles before or whatever, but people have seen like non-human entities that are not monkeys in their rainforest area, and tons of UFO activity going and coming from the ocean and flying over the island. And I mean, we show some of that archival footage at the starting of the documentary when we're kind of introducing like a historical testimony of Puerto Ricans witnessing this stuff and then recording it back in the day, like taking out the old Handycam mini DVs or something and just like recording this like oblonged or sometimes illuminated disc just moving through the blue sky. And like, what is that? Is it some kind of military test craft? I don't think so. Combine that with the testimony that Puerto Ricans over the decades have had like these kind of contact experiences on the island. It makes you think there's something about that area that makes it a hotbed for UFO activity.
Yeah, and the one thing it seems is that they're seeing all the shapes and sort of sizes of UFOs, your discs, your cigar shapes, your triangles, just like what you would expect, but it is such a kind of small place on the grand scheme of things. But one thing as well that, has been spoken about probably for some time now is the Puerto Rico Trench, which I think is off the kind of East Coast, and, rumors of bases and things like that. Is that a big belief out there that there's something under the water there?
Oh yeah, you kidding me? That's actually something that the locals themselves started saying because of how the currents was just so high that they're like, there's got to be something down there because we just keep seeing them. It's just so active that's the conclusion they came up with. And actually, we were shown satellite footage from the Aguadilla section of Puerto Rico that shows near the close to the shoreline, there is a miles long rectangular object sitting at the sea floor. Yeah, which is, you could clearly see that it's not natural. It's something clearly, artificial. And not only that, but the Puerto Rico Trench, which I believe is on the south side of the island. Um, we were also shown satellite imagery of the floor, the bottom of the trench, and there's another even longer uh, rectangular shape that's sitting on the floor on the floor bed, and that's, I believe, one of the deepest points of the ocean, if I'm not mistaken, is the Puerto Rico Trench. So, what is that? You know what I mean? Like, and it's interesting too because there was also an incident that involved the Navy doing I believe it was like that they have like the war games type of things.
Sure.
And I think it was in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. There was a story of they were conducting these games or these drills off about 100 miles off the coast of Puerto Rico, where they detected a massive object under the ocean that was moving at high speeds and then would stop. But they basically they tracked it for about 4 days. It was following them or keeping pace with whatever they were doing until they just lost it. It just disappeared from the radar, from there. But yeah, and it was huge too.
Lest we forget the testimony from Lou Elizondo about the black like a demon massive object that sucked up like a warhead or something off the coast of Puerto Rico. So I don't know. There just seems to be a lot of data points that point to weird stuff being in the ocean there. And we also found out when we were out there was the Laguna de Cartagena. And this area is extremely anomalous. This lagoon has very deep areas of it on the west side of the island again. And there's like footage historically of UFOs emanating from the lagoon and going into it. And we were possibly going to speak with somebody there, but she became quite unruly and demanded like James Fox types of money. And it didn't happen because I'm broke. But, we want to go back and check out the Laguna area as well.
That's amazing. And one of another gentleman that features in the new film, Alberto Perez, I found his story to be quite incredible as well, because it all fit together with the story you were telling, that, he'd seen an object, and by the time he'd kind of got his camera out, he managed to just see the splash of the water. I mean, that's crazy.
Actually, I never posted it. I don't know why, but I have some pictures that was sent to me by somebody of an incident. I'm not sure exactly what year it was, if it was like fairly recent. But there was an object seen in the sky over Crash Boat Beach that was photographed of course, from far with a potato, but you could see that there was something in the sky. Apparently, it dove into the water, creating a splash again, which was then photographed as well. And then after that was like a mist of some sort that was seen over the area of where it had entered. And the funny thing is I believe that the guy you was just talking about, I always forget his name. He mentions the same thing, if I'm not mistaken, where he saw some kind of a mist over the water after it had entered, which was interesting.
But I guess sticking with Alberto Perez, what I found as well, I mean, it just is always not just one thing these people have. It links into other things. And, he took you to this, well, he said he was going to take you to a lighthouse where you could see an island where things had been seen a lot, but he actually took you to this dome, this nuclear dome. So could you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's so funny. Like with this phenomenon, historically and internationally, UFOs are always somewhat present around nuclear sites, whether that's nuclear power plants or nuclear test range, you name it. And he's like, oh yeah, so first of all, Alberto is like Andy, he's an experiencer. Andy has seen his first UFO experience. What made him open up to this phenomenon and maybe believe there's something to it was seeing a UFO on Puerto Rico as a kid, right? And Alberto Perez was telling us in the car, like, yeah, my friends and I, we build hot rods. He also builds like mountain bikes and stuff. If you ever go to like the Aguadilla region, he's got a shop called Rincon Mountain Bikes. And so he's like a builder. He's very good with his hands and stuff. And so he's going over this story with us where they were racing like cars on the west side of the island, and a UFO flew over top of them, and their friends freaked out and slowed down, but Alberto did not even notice it and kept going. And so they were all talking about it after, like Alberto's like, did you see that? Or no, his friends were like, did you see that? And he's like, well, oh, wasn't there like some kind of gust of wind over us and stuff? And they said, no, there was like a really strange object that flew over top of our cars, man. And he's like, oh, so that type of stuff happens on the regular. And apparently a lot of people have testimony of that on the island. And then he's like, so I'm going to take you where, you can see the island and you can see a bunch of activities at night. You see the lights and stuff. And I was like, sweet. So we're driving out there and we arrive at the location and we're like, where are we? Where's the beach? He's like, the beach is over there. It's just past the dome. And we're like, the dome? That looks like a nuclear power plant. And he's like, oh yeah, it used to be. And I'm like, what? Why didn't you tell us this before? And so, we're kind of freaking out. I don't think he really got the relevance of that, but he also added that there frequently is sort of teams of people that are military coming in and out of there. And it's a now defunct nuclear power plant. So I guess he says that what they tell the locals is it never became operational. So they still use it as some kind of facility. And when we were there was a truck parked out front. It's always monitored 24/7, so no one can enter or exit other than military personnel. And that is where a lot of UFO activity seems to emanate around. So, yeah, it's just an interesting piece to the puzzle. But again, I'd like to dive into that and find out more about that. The beach we're at is called Domes Beach because of the nuclear power plant dome.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. When we saw the nuclear symbol, we look at each other. We're like, "Are you seeing this?" But like he said, the interesting thing is that how he mentioned it was that it's not operational. No one was using it yet. You would have activity happening, with people coming in and out, and there was clearly somebody there. I believe he was sitting in the truck, but you could see cameras all over the place, locked. So that was interesting. And like he said, that area is the same. It's part of the same area where all of the activity, well, not all of it, but the majority of the activity happens in Aguadilla. That's where that section was at. Like, I don't know if you saw, I posted, I think it was a year or so ago, the video that also came out from CBP in Puerto Rico, or was it CBP or the Coast Guard or something like that. But it was somebody who released it. They were taking a video of their computer where out of the waters, again, from that section, was a disc that came out, and it was rotating. But this one was seen coming out of the Aguadilla waters with a similar FLIR camera as well.
And that was official government footage.
That was official. Just don't know who released it. That one is again like the Aguadilla. Somebody took. They didn't post the original, but it was recorded on their phone, and you can hear them explaining what was happening and what happened prior. And you could see that this thing was just coming out of the water, and it was fairly large too, and it was spinning like that. You could see it was some kind of oscillation, and it was just rising. And then the video kind of cuts off, and it's about less than a minute, I believe, but it's pretty interesting.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, I want to move on now because the second half really features more on kind of contactees, or more specifically a contactee who met an alien being. I mean, that was a long, deep story and a lot of testimony from this guy. So do you want to kind of give us an overview of what he experienced, and then we can kind of dive into it kind of a little bit at a time?
Well, I'll say this before Darcy gets into it. So, just so you're aware, I know you also heard of me always talk about the Amaury Rivera incident from 1988, the guy who has the photos and all that. So Darcy was able to get in touch with this guy.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we're kind of on the same page where we feel like the experience kind of really fucked him up, because he was kind of difficult to speak to, and to try to get, to agree to speak to in person and all that. He was just, I don't think he had a very good experience with what happened. But the interesting thing is that in his story, he mentions the name of one of the beings that he spoke to. And what I found very interesting is that guy that you're talking about, Maldonado.
Yes, Andres Maldonado.
Yeah, he mentions the same name of this guy, and they have no affiliation.
That is interesting. Which name is it? Is it that? I've got it written down here. Is it Quescu? Is it that one? Or there was the other one. There was another one he mentioned, Amarone.
Yeah, Amarone is, I mean, based on the testimony we got, Quescu was an original human-looking alien that visited Puerto Rico and was meeting with Andres Maldonado's father.
Right, that's it. Yeah.
So yeah, so he mentions the same Amaron name that Amauri mentioned during his first interview of what his experience, what occurred with him and his experience. So, I mean, really? Two completely different people with the exact same name of this being that they met, human-like being? That's pretty remarkable. And you didn't even hear, honestly, Darcy only put up a portion of that interview. If you heard the entire thing that this guy was like the conversation we had, and I keep bugging Darcy, I'm like, Darcy, you better give me that original after all this is done, because it blew my mind. It blew my mind at the information this guy was telling us as he was talking. Like, I never in my life put any of into perspective the things that he was telling me. Like, I think the most profound one was how he mentions that we that the ones that we call the Nordics are an older race of, like, basically like their ancestors that are still around. Amarong is like the newer race, so they're like the I guess the elders in a sense, and how what they achieve technologically they achieve through time, and he explains how we're going to get to the same level as them, but through mistakes and through heartache and through pain. So all of the suffering that we're experiencing, basically what they were able to achieve in let's say millions of years, we will end up getting there in half that time, but through the worst way possible, which is trial and error and killing and all that. And eventually we will reach that same level through a different path. You understand what I'm saying? That the way when he brought that up, I was like, wow, I never would have like even considered that thought or that, but the way he worded it and the way he brought it up and mentioned it, that it was told to him, I just sat there and I was like, this guy cannot be making this up at all. Like, that would be one of the most, I guess you could say, what's the word for it? Like, colorful minds, or most like imaginative people I've ever met to come up with that much intricate detail that was supposedly told to him by this individual.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if like it's related to this kind of um, future human hypothesis that like maybe we interpreted Amaron or Kwasku as an alien, but really we are just them that's not up to par technologically yet. And they're monitoring our progress, so to speak, and trying to like maybe intervene a little bit, but they can't to a certain degree, or I don't know, like that could be part of it. But it definitely has, like, in my mind, in my own sort of way of thinking about it, just this kind of like Michael P. Masters, you know, and then our own sort of paintbrush of the experience and understanding of the situation, where it might be something we just couldn't comprehend in the 1980s or early 90s in Andres Maldonado's experience, so it's a really weird, like, it's a strange case, right? Like, I've been covering the UFO beat for a long time, and I haven't really, and I've covered like the abduction sort of phenomenon too, and I'm a believer that some of that stuff is very credible, and that the sort of like experience or contactee thing is prevalent, right? And it's something I definitely want to cover more, especially after getting all this testimony and hearing this. It really points to a certain idea in my head. But Andy's he's got obviously his ideas about it too. So we kind of discuss these things in a very open and healthy way.
Absolutely, it's the best way.
Yeah, I mean, it's like with you, Vinny. It's no similar to Darcy. You guys come from, you guys are, we're on the same path, but on different roads. You understand what I'm saying? Like you're coming from someone who is interested in it, and I'm coming from someone who's actually seen it. So that's where the perspective is. It changes, but we're still on the same path to the same destination.
Yeah, very true. So, Darcy, have you not witnessed anything before then?
So I've said this before. I saw some stuff when I was younger. I was interested already. And I don't know if that was kind of like a little nod to me to continue down this journey of investigation. But when I was around 21, I was on a flight from Denver, Colorado airport to the west. I believe I was going to LA or something like that at the time. And I was looking out my window because I used to love to sit in the window seat. Don't do that anymore. But I was looking out the window and I just thought, like, it'd be really cool to see a UFO one day, And I looked up instead of looking straight out at that time. And I saw what looked like this metallic cube structure. And I like kind of started panicking because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. At the time, this is before like we had phones that had 4K video cameras on them. This is 18 years ago. I saw that and I reached for this little Sanyo video pocket camera that I traveled around with because I've always been like a camera guy, always wanted to record and, I studied film and all that stuff. Like I'm interested in camera technology. As soon as I was powering this thing up and I'm keeping my eye on it, looking like this, it's kind of like up at an angle. It just drifts over top of the fuselage. And that was it, right? So then I'm like, okay, what the hell? And I'm looking at the person to my right and I'm like, am I losing my mind? Have I gone nuts? Like, and the only other time that I saw something that was, interesting, I was living in Australia. This was again much later. I was like 28 years old, and my friend and I were living in a house in South Oakley, a suburb of Melbourne, and we went for pizza. So we're walking at night. It's about 8 o'clock during their winter time. And I'm walking in this neighborhood that's pretty dark because as you go outside of Melbourne, in some neighborhoods, there's less lamp posts, like street posts lighting the road. And so you can see the night sky really well with stars and stuff. And we saw this like white orb-shaped object, not TTS, not like flashing lights like red and blue and stuff like that, just white.
Right.
Fly from like directly over top of our head into our periphery and then go over the horizon. And it did a zigzag basically on the way there. And it was over the horizon in less than like 5 seconds. If it was like a shooting star, it would have been just a streak. It wouldn't have done a zigzag, and it would have actually gotten brighter for a moment as it burned up. This just stayed the same solid light and did that maneuver. And I looked at my friend, he looked at me, and he was like this Brit that was a bench joiner at the time, working in Australia. And he was like, did you see that? And I was like, yeah. And, we just kept walking. And at the time I was actually filming and interviewing people in Australia that have experienced UFO stuff. And I actually featured that one of the major interviews with Shane Ryan, who's covered the Westall 66 story from the get-go. I drove to Canberra, interviewed him there, just outside of Canberra at the Dish, which is the old satellite tracking system that they used during the Apollo era. And he told me all about Westall 66, and I put that at the beginning of my docu-series, Secret Space UFOs.
Amazing. Wow. That's incredible. So looking back, looking at this documentary that you've put out and your previous work, it's got its own style. It's got your style on it. But tell us a little bit about the production side of things. Do you have a crew with you? Who's on the camera? How do you work it and put it all together?
Yeah. I'll speak to that. And then Andy, I guess you can add some color. But essentially the crew is me, myself, and I. I get a budget that's very small, and I don't go to social media to ask for hundreds of thousands of dollars because I would feel like a bit of a grifter or an ass because people would attack me. But that's never stopped them before. Essentially, I focus on a story that I want to cover, and I start building an archive of the information that's published or public, that's well known. And then I try to find for elevated parts of that story that may not have been featured before. I always want to cover something new because, that's one of the greatest criticisms you can get in this field is, oh, well, that's all old information or whatever, right? I have a couple, I guess, not so happy fans that follow me on all my films and give that same review. In other words, they're either debunkers or people that just love to harass me. But that is essentially it. But, I bring my camera gear. I usually shoot with 2 DSLRs that have anamorphic lenses. And I shoot in 4K and I edit in 4K, and I have microphones, lav mics. I've had my mic screw up, and you can hear it in some of my documentaries. So I apologize for that. I salvage the audio as much as I can. But you can do so much as a content creator these days with so little. And I think that's been on my side as technology advances. I also reach out to people in the community to help me because there's some amazing researchers that are on Twitter, that are on Facebook, Instagram, that know interesting facts about certain stories. And we, workshop that together. And I always give credit where credit is due in my films. And I even pay people the measly money that I've got when they do substantial work in helping me. So Andy, for example, I covered his flights, his food, and anytime I could give him a bit of money for extra things he's done above and beyond, I do. And he also on the trip was helping, filming certain shots when he could, and some of his footage made that into the documentary. But yeah, it's collaborative effort all around, and I'm just doing what I can to shine a light on interesting stories in the phenomenon.
I would like to clarify on something that Darcy said, and I know that he knows, and he's been my witness to this. I only accepted what he offered when it came to the flight and the food. Anything else that he tried to give me, what would I tell you, Darcy?
Nah, man, nah.
Because I just wanted to do it because I felt the right thing to do, and that's why, even when I first did the first documentary with him, he offered. And I told him no. And then he insisted. And I said, listen, cover my gas and my tolls and we'll call it even. And that's it, But that's just, that's just me. I just never wanted to. I didn't want to be. I didn't want it to be about that in any way whatsoever, ever, because it's just. I don't know. And you know who's the funny thing is Andres Maldonado said the exact same thing when we offered him, and it's something that I've noticed with legitimate people who've had experiences when they're offered something for it. A lot, at least from what I've seen, most of them deny it. Most of them like no, it's. And when they asked, it's just like they say it's. I just feel like it's not something that I should be doing. Like it's weird, but it feels wrong.
Yeah, when somebody asks you upfront via email for $10,000 for 30 minutes to sit down with them, that's a major red flag, and that's happened to me before. Um, I've been on the receiving end of that, and that's to some people serious disclosure, but to others not so much. That seems to be a little bit sketchy to me, and look, like I offered money to everybody that we interviewed in Puerto Rico, what I could give. And, for example, I gave like $100 to a guy that took us to the beach where he saw something go into the ocean. And he was crying when I gave that to him because Puerto Rico is not doing well. It's very poor. There's not a lot of stuff happening right there for them economically. And they've been hit by hurricane after hurricane, and they're like rebuilding, and then they get hit again. And so, I feel bad that I couldn't even provide more than that. But, Andres Maldonado rejected any kind of like compensation, and the CBP agent, the whistleblower that we went to meet and get the testimony about the Aguadilla 2013 UAP footage, he didn't want anything either. I tried, and he was like, nope, that's not what this is about, buddy. I need to just get this story straight so people understand how this all went down and what's going on around here. So, and that makes that actually, it makes me feel good. It makes me realize in my heart that what we're doing is right, because people are constantly saying no, don't do that. There were a few that asked for quite a bit of money, which I didn't have. I wish I did, it would make life easier, but I'm not in it for that. I'm in it for just telling interesting stories and being a part of the community. I am just like you, Vinny, but at a different place, getting out there and doing stuff.
I just wanted to say real quick, I understand from the point of view of, for example, you and Vinny, when you're doing what you do, I see it differently because you're creating something where I guess you could say revenue can come in from it. You understand? But I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly, but at least with me and, for example, for the people that we saw down there who, like I said before, have had an experience. Even the guy that took the $100, he didn't want it at first. Darcy pushed it on him. It was only $100. And when he finally took it, that's when he started crying and saying thank you and everything. But even at that point, that man who had nothing didn't want that $100 for telling that story. You understand? But it's just, for some reason, it's something about when you actually are in front of it that you get this sense that you just have to tell people. And I find more legitimacy in someone who refuses it, because that to me is telling me, you're telling me the truth. You're not bullshitting me. You're not trying to swindle me. You're telling me the truth because you're not looking for anything from this, but just to tell your story of what you experienced. That to me is way more valuable than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that completely. It just takes away that red flag and that potential ulterior motive for someone. Well, listen, guys, before I let you go, please tell everyone where they can find the new documentary.
Well, if you want to support my grift, you can go to Apple TV or you can go to Amazon.com. It's going to be available on other streamable platforms, but it's at a very cheap price compared to other grifters in this community. Yeah, thanks for having us on, man. It's all love. I like to bring some comedy to it. There is something going on with this phenomenon, and I'm really appreciative that we got to have a chat with you about my latest story.
It's my pleasure, both of you. Thank you so much. I will make sure also that your own personal links are in the description so people can go and follow and keep up with what you're doing as well. But I just want to say a huge, huge thank you to you both. Again, great work on the documentary. And I really do hope you get back out there to Puerto Rico and be able to tell some more stories and bring them, more into the kind of community and the public domain. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Vinny.
And finally, to everyone watching, please go and follow all the links below. I will also link the footage to the Aguadilla video raw so that you can check that out. And by all means, if you want, do your own analysis. Read the SCU analysis that's done. If you really want to kind of get into it, please do. It's a fascinating case. But as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.